Lesson 29 today is about negative and zero exponents, and we're going to start off with some key vocabulary. Take a moment to make sure this gets into your notes. Pause now if you'd like to. The definition of x to the negative n power is if n is any real number and x is any real number that is not zero, then 1 over x to the n power is equal to x to the negative n power. All that we've done here, if we have a 1 over x to the n, if we want to make that power negative, we bring it up to the numerator. And then if we want to work in the opposite direction, if we have x to the negative n power and we want to make that power positive, we take it into the denominator. Again, pause now if you need to get this written in your notes. This is an important formula that we'll refer back to pretty frequently. Now our first three problems. A. What we want to do is we want to simplify 3 to the negative second power. Now we said, if we want to take a negative power and turn it into a positive power, we take the whole thing from the numerator to the denominator. So we're going to get 1 over 3 to the second power. That eliminates our negative power. So we can go ahead now and say this is going to be equal to 1 over 3 squared, and we know 3 squared is 9. So we've got an answer of 1/9. So 3 to the negative second power must be 1/9. Now let's look at our next problem. Our next problem, we have 1 over 3 to the negative third power. What is this going to be equal to? Well, if we're looking at this problem, we know we want to bring our negative power, we want to make our negative power positive, so we're going to have to move the whole expression up into the numerator. So we're going to get 3 to the third power. That could be 3 to the third power over 1. You could write it like that since we're switching its spot from the denominator to the numerator to get rid of the negative. So we're going to have 3 to the third power. Well, we know 3 to the third power is just 3 times 3 times 3, which is equal to 27. So we'd have 27 over 1, which is just 27. And we've got our next answer. Problem C, we have negative 3 to the negative second power. If we have negative 3 to the negative second power, what we're going to do is we want to get rid of this negative power, so we're going to move the whole thing into the denominator. We're going to get 1 over, this is equal to 1 over negative 3. All we're doing is eliminating the negative in our power, our exponent, squared. And now we can find our answer. We're going to get 1 over, we've got negative 3 squared, that means negative 3 times negative 3, that must be positive 9, so we've got our answer of 1/9. And we're all done. If you've got a question, go ahead and write it down now. We're going to move on to our next slide. Okay, let's go ahead and simplify this. We've got some negative powers in here. If we want to simplify this, we've got multiplication all the way through. X squared times y to the fifth times y to the negative second times x to the negative second. So we have to figure out how many x's we have, and you can see we have x squared and we have x to the negative second power. Well, if we look at how many x's we have now, we must have x to the 0th power, because 2 minus 2 is 0. Then we're going to have y, and we've got y to the 5 minus 2, that's 3, to the third power. Now, whenever we have something to the 0th power, you may remember from the past, that's always equal to 1. So we get 1y to the third. And we wouldn't want to report our answer like this, we'd want to simplify it. If we have 1y to the third, that's just equal to y to the third. And we're all done. We can go ahead and box our answer. We've taken this expression that looks pretty complicated, and we turned it into something that looks pretty simple. Let's go ahead and move on to our next slide. Now here, again, we have something that looks pretty complicated. We're going to make it look pretty simple. We're going to make it look pretty simple by using our distributive property. So we're going to go ahead and multiply our term in on the outside times our two terms within the parentheses. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to get x to the negative second, y to the negative second, times everything we see here, x squared, y squared. We could put this in parentheses, we don't have to. Plus, because we've got the plus sign, then we've got x to the negative second, y to the negative second again, times 4, x to the fourth, y squared. And now we can go ahead and solve. We've got to figure out how many x's we have. X to what power? Well, x to the negative second X to the second, positive. Well, negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So we get x to the 0th power. We know that's 1. Y to the negative second, y to the second, that must be y to the 0th power. Plus, well, now we're going to put our number out in front. We always like the number out in front. So we're going to get 4. Then we've got x to the negative second and x to the 4th. That must be x squared. Y to the negative second and y to the second. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So we get y to the 0th power. Now let's simplify. X to the 0th and y to the 0th, that's like saying 1 times 1. We all know that's 1. Plus 4 x squared times 1. Now we don't need to write that times 1. We can go ahead and we can erase that. I'm going to undo it so that we get our final answer of 1 plus 4x squared. And we're all done. If you've got a question, go ahead and re-watch how we did this, or write it down and ask it in class. We're going to be practicing this some more on our lesson practice, page 124. Make sure your notes are completed, and I'll see you during our next class.